Hey everyone, Pure Insanity here. If you're playing Diablo 4 Season 4, you absolutely need to watch this video right now. I know many feel the Eternal Realm is for the casual chump, but I was super excited to get build crafting and check out the pit, so I decided to play Eternal for the first time. And I tell you what, you're going to be glad I did. The pit experience is much different than it was in the PTR, so if you want to gear up that crushing build you're so hyped about, everything in this video is important information you're going to want to know now. I'm starting off with tier 31, and I've got clips from tier 41, 51, and 61, so you can see the escalating difficulty. At tier 31, the masterworking material for Masterworks 5 through 8 drop, which is why this tier is important. Most good builds should be able to complete it, but even at this tier, it already feels like Abattoir Zur. The mobs have a lot of HP and hit pretty hard. If you're running a glass cannon build, prepare to die once or twice, but if you make it to the boss and have good single target damage, you're set. For some quick context on the build I'm using, it's a mob-focused, super tanky survival build. I crafted a Tyrael's Might and got lucky with a greater affix on max resistance. I'm using the Melted Heart and running aspect of the Undying. My plan was to use the Ahavarian to cheese my way up as fast as possible, and to skip ahead a moment, I'm still dying in tier 50s and stuck in the tier 60s right now. So this is really AOZ level difficulty. That said, it's a ton more fun. The whole point of the pit was providing a meaningful endgame where you couldn't just ignore mechanics. Now, when it comes to the mobs, it's mostly the same old, same old. The mobs don't have any new mechanics, but they're strong enough you're not going to be able to one-shot them as you're building up your gear. I don't think anyone really expected it would be that tough this early, but it was mentioned that the pit tier 150 was supposed to be like AOZ tier 25, aka practically impossible. And that brings us to the first huge difference from the PTR. In the PTR, you started with a whole bunch of high-level mats, and the masterworking cost was super cheap. But there's no real way to get the higher mats without beating tier 61 plus pit levels. That means if you planned on running an endgame build that needs multiple greater affixes or double or trip crit masterworks, you're probably going to need a different build to get the gear and mats you need first. I tried a Wear NATO and Minion Necro build as well, and they started having trouble in tier 40s because I didn't have the gear needed to make them offensively strong enough to avoid dying. The Ahavarian fits really well in the Arclash build and is better than any gear I have in the first day since release, but without it, this build was struggling a bit too. In this boss fight, I don't have the artillery shrine buff, it's just Tyrael's Might effect. This isn't a great boss killer build, but you'll see at this level the boss still goes down pretty quick. This build is tanky enough I don't have to play boss mechanics just yet. As we go into tier 41, you won't see much difference in the mobs, but keep an eye on my resources. They definitely dip a little bit, and anytime in these clips you see my resources low, it means just about any other build would have died. The mobs definitely start hitting harder. While tier 41 is playing, let's talk gear upgrades. You can't reset masterworking until after it is fully upgraded, and that means you can't reset anything until you can beat tier 61 plus. Since the mats are in such short supply, I recommend not upgrading post Masterwork 4 if you don't hit the first crit that you want. Keep it at rank 4 until you find an alternate or a better piece of gear. Another important note that I didn't know is Masterwork crits can upgrade tempering too. Not sure if that was already common knowledge, but this means getting a trip crit on legendary gear has a 0.8% chance. So if you hit 2 crits and miss the third, I would leave that one alone and wait until you have all your other gear done, or work on an alternate piece of gear. Moving on to the tier 41 boss fight. Builds that are good boss killers shouldn't have any issues, but you'll still need to play some mechanics. You can absolutely get one shot if the fight takes you more than a few seconds. It's not so much the boss that's the real problem, but the shadow attacks. This was noted in the PTR, and it's because there's a lot of DR that doesn't apply to the shadow attacks. You'll see the 2 whirlwinds in this clip rail me for all my resources. If I didn't have the melted heart on, that would have been a one-shot. I'm going to skip through some of the tier 51 gameplay. Same deal moving up from tier 31 to tier 41. Mobs take a bit longer to kill and they hit a bit harder. It still is only taking me about 3 minutes to clear the mobs at tier 51, but that's up from 2:30 in tier 41. That said, do remember the context, I'm using the Ahavarian. Blast Wave and Artillery Shrine buffs don't one-shot many of the mobs. So notoriously fast builds like Teleport are still going to take some time. Again, that was the point of the pit. The devs wanted to make it hard enough that you had to engage the mobs in more than one shot. Regarding bosses, this is where you start to see the escalation in boss HP. It looks like there's around a 40% increase in boss HP from tier 41 to 51, but tier 61 is probably double tier 51. I don't know the numbers, but it's compounded by the boss attacks hitting harder and harder. It starts taking substantially longer to fight them because that's where you have to start playing mechanics, and not just some of them, a lot of them. So at pit tier 51, the Barrier Melted Heart Undying build is getting one shot even with Tyrael's Might. And that's why Tyrael's Might has been called out by so many content creators as the most desirable Uber this season. With DR being limited to uniques, it is a lot harder to boost defense. The only real way to boost survivability from one-shots is now max health. Because, let's be honest, the Melted Heart would work, but the Melted Heart doesn't get any love. That said, the Melted Heart is a sleeper. It has a 3x damage affix multiplier, and if you get that as a greater affix and masterwork crits, my goodness, I think it'll be tremendous. Moving on to the tier 61 gameplay. This is where mob damage is going to start really hurting squishy builds. My build is so mob focused, I'm still easily getting through tier 61 mobs, but the bosses wreck me because I'm not single target damage. And remember, this is the first tier you get the final masterworking material. So builds that are dependent on specific affixes like cooldown, size, and duration won't have them fully upgraded at this point and may not be entirely functional. I think 60 to 80 is going to be the hardest for many builds. I would grind 40s or 50s until you get all your mats for Masterwork 8 gear, or even grind unique greater affixes and Ubers at this point. I think once people are past tier 80, we'll start to see the videos of all the craziness. On that note, it's time to wrap this video up. And like most things in my life, the video will end with my death. I'll let the video play out so you can get a good feel of bosses at this tier. I just have one final tip. If you run out of time before you can kill the boss, you will not get any masterwork materials. You do get some loot, but there's no material consolation prize. So if you're dying in a boss fight and time runs out, it's really not worth it to keep trying. Just exit the pit and try again and save yourself some time. I hope everyone enjoyed the video and doesn't give me too much grief playing Eternal, but I have so much build crafting to do, and there may never be a better time to play Eternal. I'm personally really happy to have a reason to continue playing my seasonal characters and to put the piles of mats built up in Eternal to good use. So, stay frosty, folks, and I'll see you in Sanctuary.